First of all, I would be annoying you with citated from Samuel Beckett's poem. First the body no. First the place no. First both. Now either. Now the other. Sick of the either, try the other. Sick of it back, sick of the either. So on. Somehow on. Till sick of both. Throw up and go. Where neither. Till sick of there. Throw up and back. The body again. Where none. The place again. Where none. Try again. Fail again. Better again. Or better worse. Fail worse again. Still worse again. Till sick for good. Throw up for good. Go for good. Where neither for good. Good and all worstward ho. 1983. My Testament to Students Studying Critical Medical Anthropology, Mitzub'ixi Qu'q, Osaka University, Toyonaka, Japan. Dear friends, at the time to say goodbye for my students in medical anthropology, I will confess sincerely my testament mentioned below. This document can be divided two parts. The former mentions my own experience in rural Honduras in mid-1980s, and the latter mentions my respectable heroes when I was graduate student of public health and social medicine, and I will add with some citations. In the mid-1980s, I joined in the Japan Overseas Cooperation Volunteers, JOCVs, in Honduras, Central America. My work was an assistance for public health education in rural areas in western mountainous part of Honduras. I have researched how people think and act about health through specific practices. The local people who received our public health program understand health simply as the absence from disease. They do not give the word salud. In Spanish, that means health. The positive meaning that Westerner can mention sometime as positive health. I think the concept of health of the latter was newly introduced from outside the community. There existed two concepts of health. One is traditional thought of conditions of body that mention there is no disease. The another was positive health in modern Westerner sense that we would try to introduce from outside the community. Nonetheless, we have tried to introduce new positive health into communities. The people did not accept and maintain old one. We confront epistemological barrier of the local people, the one of Honduran Ministry of Health officials used to say they were ignorant. He said that because of local people's ignorance, our public health program would be failed. He thought that the villagers were ignorant in public health knowledge. However, this officer has completely forgotten that his own concept of positive health also had been once educated. On the other hand, villagers, of course, did not consider themselves ignorant, nor are they aware that they are resisting against official public health program. The village people expressed that the new public health program was simply too difficult to use and understand. Consequently, they were ironically labeled as resistors by the officials. Of course, the programs had attractive points for the villagers. If they could attend a free seminar of our programs, they were offered basic drugs, a notebook, a meal, or some snacks as reward by registering their names. Also, there was an advantage such as to making friends by attending the workshops. Once the project has been started, villagers were benefited from being able to borrow free loan money for the installation of latrines. Small but now latrine can be strong symbol of introducing new concept of positive health. Those who accepted the project recognize themselves as progressive, while those who did not accept it were as being still ignorant. But the ones who did not accept were criticized progressive men as those who had sold their souls to the outsiders, such as government people. Then the public health program had introduced the seed of discord into village. The officers never express people who did not accept the program ignorance in front of them. Unfortunately, this kind of insult concepts also had been introduced into village through the public health program. At the same time, in a village where various social dynamics were functioning, Informed consent does not always proceed rationally. Insofar, all villagers will not accept a new public health program. Program supervisors were evaluating by yield rates and performance into communities. Officers there participated explicit competition by according their yield rates and performance among their own different communities' programs. For whom was the public health program? Naturally for the common people, but also for the working officers who were ordered by their project provide supervisors. Here, I would to explain this case using the Foucauldian theory. For instance, a person who had once studied these theories would interpret it this way. Michel Foucault said that the power, especially political power, does not only oppress the people but create them new subjects that practice under social effects. In my case, to be a recipient of public health program is to be a subject through acting on. However, then the person who rejects the public health program coming into the village must also become another new subject, these resistors who oppose the program. And this is why the stereotypical adjectives, ignorant, conservative, and no progressive, were attached by the proponents of the program. When I participated in the health care program in Honduras was in the worldwide primary health care, the Alma Ata Movement Declaration in 1978. As above, I suppose that the Foucauldian theory can be applied on the primary health care approach. Here there are two images of good health, both Honduran in left and of the Nicaraguan in right. These two images of good health were different by depending on their governmental political ideology. Honduras was an anti-communist country supported by former President Ronald Reagan of the United States. Nicaragua had Sandinista revolutionary government which promoted the anti-capitalist good health policy under the support by Cuba. The mid-1980s figures demonstrate the national differences between them. Two figures demonstrate the national difference of good health or healthy lives between Honduras and Nicaragua in the mid-1980s. Then, even if community-based and communities' participation based on informed consent are central, the self-determination of resistance to the introduction of external programs might also be respected. I was not very aware of this during my stay in Honduras. After leaving the country, I learned about the rural appraisal by Dr. Robert Chambers, the principle of the action research by Sol Tax, which has a long history in anthropology, and the subsequent community-based participatory research CBPR, in which the option of rejection from the people's point of view, rather than resistance from the side of power holder. I found that it should be respect for accepting the option of refusal as equal as for accordance and or acceptance. Just as I have learned the people's autonomous spirits in public health programs. When medical anthropologists have the will to change the conservative or traditional things in a village, this is always considered problematic as it violates the dogma or doctrine of cultural relativism that anthropology has long accepted as discipline to its work. On the other hand, in applied anthropology, it is commonplace to identify malfunctions within a community and, through discussions with the residents, to confirm the will of the community to promote projects. Today, when the former term applied anthropology has faded and become public anthropology and or engaged anthropology, egalitarian dialogue within the community's autonomy is very important. The cold-hearted word of cultural relativism has now receded in medical anthropology, and the emphasis is now on cultural egalitarianism, dialogue under equal conditions, and community-based autonomy. Over there, in the 1980s, a project of communities' total conversion for modern public health based on paternalism, is not different from the medical missionary work medical mission of the colonial era. When I was writing the paper about the story mentioned above, later entitled Health Promotion and Health Ideology, I guess I had not yet arrived at this perception of medical anthropology as medical missionary work there. I was probably stuck in the dock so that it is the residents who change their ideas and actions through health and medical treatment projects, not the medical anthropologists themselves who change their own ideas and attitudes. Pictures present from left to right. Rudolf Ludwig Karl Virchow, 1821 to 1902. George Hunt, 1854 to 1933. W.H.R. Rivers, 1864 to 1922, and Michel Foucault, 1926 to 1984. I began studying medical anthropology in 1981, and there were 4 heroes for me at that time. In order of their birth dates, they are Rudolf Ludwig Karl Virchow, 1821 to 1902, George Hunt, 1854 to 1933, William Halse Rivers, 1864 to 1922, and Paul Michel Foucault, 1926 to 1984. Foucault was born in the same year as my mentor, Yonizo Nakagawa, 1926 to 1997. Virchow and Rivers are well known as the founders of medical anthropology in the Anglo-American world. Each of them is a unique and brilliant individual who has influenced my books and articles in various ways. Yonizo Nakagawa, 1926 to 1997. Virchow brought us a practical challenge at the roots of medical anthropology with his dictum: medicine is a social science to the bone. W.H.R. Rivers was the psychiatrist who, along with Sigmund Freud, described war neuroses or shell shock, a kind of combat fatigue, considered to be a related syndrome of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. He also established the genealogical method, a significant advance in kinship research. On the other hand, he participated in the Cambridge University Torres Strait expedition, organized by Alfred Court Haddon, and argued that, apart from their capacity for acuity, the savages had no physiological differences in their repertoire of sensibilities, and that language and metaphor provided diversity in illness expression and classification. In particular, he suggested that the classification of sickness was as systematic in uncivilized societies as to be comparable to the Western taxonomy of diseases or nosology. Foucault not only developed the concept of biopower, but also considered the concept of governing. The term, governmentality, how to govern people and society through biomedicine and demography. Today, the concept of governmentality has become an essential analytical tool for many researchers analyzing the public health and medical ethics. Many of you may not know George Hunt. However, he is called as Quisalid, a sorcerer or shaman who appears pseudonymously in Franz Boas' ethnography of the Quackiyatl, today as the Quack. In the chapter of the sorcerer and his magic in Levi Strauss' monumental book, entitled as Structural Anthropology, published in 1963, translated from French to English. Among many anthropologists it is known the name of Quisalid but never known his real name, George Hunt. I learned that Quisalid was George Hunt from James Clifford's book, The Predicament of Culture, 1988. Hunt's genealogical origins were both Tlingit and British, not Quack, and he grew up in Quack territory with his parents and through intermarriage and adoption became himself a native anthropologist familiar with Quack language and culture. Franz Boas became friends with George Hunt to exhibit the Quack at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. Boas taught Hunt linguistic anthropology and phonetic notation, especially Quack orthograph. Hunt is said to have written more than 10,000 pages of ethnographic notes of Quack including his autobiographical experience for Franz Boas. When I still reread the chapter, The Sorcerer and His Magic by Levi Strauss, through his storytelling, I am still impressed by the autoethnography of George Hunt. That is the things about Quisalid. It seems to me that native anthropologists can reach the inner recesses of cultural understanding without going through the dogma of cultural relativism. It also seems to me that the technique for reading across cultures is not to immerse oneself in the culture of the others. The technique for reading across cultures is always to be conscious of the fact that one's own culture dissolves in the culture of the others by forgetting what one has learned. In other words, as an anthropologist himself, George Hunt could dissolve his role as a sorcerer because he analyzed other healers in the culture in question by practice of his cross-cultural reading as reflexive process. The important thing is not that he took epistemological relativism but that he did understand what is to be powerful healer among the Quack through his devious and unethical performance among Indians. Japanese social medicine from the 1920s onward, as described in the proceedings of this meeting, tried to live up to Virchow's dictum that medicine is a social science to the bone. Medical doctors, like applied medical anthropologists today, tried to practice their social medicine by spending time in rural villages and urban squatters. However, in Japan from the 1930s to 1945, they were grabbed by thought control policy, recruited by military soldiers, and even some of them defected to the Soviet Union and were purged by dictator Joseph Stalin. And young idealist medical doctor survivors were disappointed by Japan's defeat in the war. After Japan's defeat, the occupied military had introduced United States public health policy instead pre-war German social medicine. Now we confront with dilemma of whether to change our mind or reform our society. Anyway, we are requested to behave with reflective criticism. It can fall into another pitfall of reproducing unreflective criticism, criticism for criticism's sake, and falling into mere condemnation. Criticism is an act like walking a tightrope, but it worth to try again and again. I quote my fever phrases of the passage on Heraclitus All Things Change by Quincy Jones and Ray Brown. Everything must change, nothing stays the same, everyone will change, no one stays the same, the young become the old, and mysteries do unfold 'cause that's the way of time, nothing and no one goes unchanged. Everything must change. My last words, my testament, are as follows. We must not only hope that through criticism, the future of the subject will change in a favorable and appropriate manner, but we must also have the courage to change ourselves as critics. Yours sincerely, Mitzub'ixi Qu'q, your good friend.